from each of your guys' perspective, can you describe a time in your life when you felt like you needed to reclaim your power because power was lost? And what was like the first thing that you did to move yourself out of that? You want to take that right off the bat? Sure.
So for me, it was alcohol abuse. And I had struggled with alcohol for many years, about 12 years of my life. And for me, one of the first things that I did to kind of pull me out of that was more something that happened to me. And that was finding my connection to spirit, to God, to oneness, whatever term you guys are comfortable, the one with many names, our higher power, higher self. And it happened while I was on a cliff in Hawaii, a pretty dramatic moment of feeling my connection to spirit and being awed by nature. And the way that I kind of parlayed what I would call now was a mystical experience was when I came back to Nashville, Tennessee, where I had been living. I got involved with a beautiful Sangha, a community. It was, in this case, a Buddhist recovery center. And it specialized in working with people who suffered with addiction. And the meditation teacher was an incredibly gifted soul who himself had overcome addiction. And I got involved in that community, and it taught me the principles of mindfulness, of sort of becoming aware of my thoughts, becoming aware of all the negative self-speak that I was telling myself, becoming aware of my attachments. And out of that, I began a meditation practice, which I would urge everybody here, if you're not already involved in the practice, it's incredibly important for connecting you to spirit, connecting you to God, connecting you to the one. And through that we find peace, through that we find meaning, through that we find comfort, we find joy, and we find vision. And I'm not anywhere close to a realized being. My partner can ascribe, can witness that, right? I still have my struggles for sure. And Ashley, I appreciate you sharing your struggles on this journey. And so I think the first step in reclaiming our lives is admitting that we have shortcomings and we have struggles that need to be overcome, and that we seek practices that are going to tune us into ourselves and tune us in to our greater connection to Creator, to the one with many names. And another thing for me too was establishing a daily practice aside from meditation. I guess you could call it meditation. For me, it's hiking. But finding some kind of positive practice that you do every single day that connects you deeper to yourself and that connects you to others. And that's incredibly important. And that's something that I found. It could be music for you. It could be art. It could be connecting with an animal or a child, right? It could be any number of things, but really finding some kind of outlet of authentic connection that becomes your go-to every single day. And it should be something that connects you to spirit. And that's really important. I don't want to go off too long, but last thing I'll say is to reclaim your life, man, you better surrender. You better learn to surrender. Oh my gosh, you better learn to surrender. That is so important. Learning that, you don't have all the control of your ego, right? And we can't, I'll try to connect mindfulness to that right now, is when you learn to quiet your mind down enough through practices like meditation, through communing with nature, through creative outlets, through service, then you have to, then you can quiet enough to actually surrender. And when I mean surrender, I mean is giving your life over to your higher power, giving your life over to God, giving your life over to Brahman, to spirit. And when you can quiet your mind enough, you can actually surrender enough to be able to hear what it is that spirit has set forth for you. That's where the vision comes. The vision comes when you quiet your mind and you surrender. And you say, I know my mind doesn't know everything. The ego doesn't know everything. It's the spirit that knows. And the spirit will tell you what to do. But you got to quiet your mind enough in the first place to do that. So there's a link between mindfulness and surrender. And I think both together, connecting them, is how you cultivate the life that you want. And I'm still in the process of trying to do that myself. And I think it's an ongoing process and journey. Yeah.
Thank you.
What? I had an inner chuckle when you said a time we reclaimed our power, because at this point in my life, I see the whole purpose of life being moments, relationships, challenges, synchronicities, whatever, that are inviting us to reclaim our authentic power. And by that, I mean in the divine sense. We live in a world that really defines power in some very limiting and corrupted ways. And everything I do and have done is rooted in the idea that this whole journey is about remembering who we are and being brave enough to be that in a world that wants us to conform. And my life path, I'm 46, and I can look back now and be like, wow, all of that shit was perfect. Like every bit that I don't want to relive, I've been divorced twice, I lost a brother premature, like all the stuff, right? We all have our stories, but it has helped me see where I was abandoning myself, trying to fit in, be loved, whatever it was, right? We all have that. And every time I saw it and connected, because I too, I'm a channel. I don't know. I'm just trying to be of service to whatever that higher force is. And then I can remember over and over and over and over and over and over again, and then be brave with what I remember. So I try and live my life every single day from that place. It doesn't have to be a big moment for me. It's just being willing to stay curious and remember and pivot. I'm in the middle of pivoting my brand yet again, pivoting my life over and over again. And that makes me feel like I want to be the kind of power that feels like a campfire that you want to be around, not the kind of power that pushes, right? And at this point in my life, I have more and more people share versions of that as a reflection. And that's all I need, right? That life's going to take care of the rest. I'll show up, but I want to feel like that to people. So I kind of answered it.
No, that's awesome. You got it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I feel like I've shared so much today, so I'm going to try to speak to things I haven't already spoken to. So I started to really reclaim my power when I became a mother, but I'm going to dive like way deeper into that because I really had no clear definition of what that meant. So I didn't have positive role models of mothers or grandmothers. And a year and a half after my son was born, I had an unexpected pregnancy and I lost that baby. And if anyone's ever been through miscarriage, it's the only time in my life I really dropped my marbles. And I'm really, it's hard to talk about and not get too emotional about it. That was the moment though. That was the moment where I had to reclaim my power because I could no longer live my life in the place of trauma. I could no longer give my gifts and my talents and my strengths away and let people tell me that I was unworthy. And I had to look at my son, who was the first living embodiment of love that came out of my body, and say, I too deserve that love. And I'm going to start the healing journey and try to get my life back on track and reclaim my power for you because you deserve better and I deserve better. So that was the first moment. I agree. It still continues to unfold and evolve. But that was the moment when I think I was given love that I realized I'm worthy of receiving that love. Yeah.
Okay, great. So two themes that have come up while I've been listening to you guys. One is, of course, well, actually earlier on was addiction. Burnout is another one. And I guess I want to talk about burnout because I feel like so many of us are in some form of burnout through, sometimes that's through addiction. Addiction can cause burnout, right? It can be burnout for, I sometimes get burnout with the amount of work I do. So what's your guys' approach to burnout when you feel it coming on? Because I don't think any one of us up here are strangers to that. Probably none of you guys are strangers to it either. What is it that you do practically when you feel those first, like, oh man, here I go again? Assuming that that is true for y'all.
So I actually really resisted being like a poster child for burnout because I never really identified as that being the thing. But my understanding of burnout is that what we do is actually the topical layer of burnout. Why we do it is the real source of burnout. And so I check myself regularly because I call it relational burnout. That's the true source, right? Who am I telling myself I need to be okay in the world, to be loved, to be valued, whatever it is. So I check what's my relationship to myself and my body, what's my relationship to spirit or a higher guidance, and what's my relationship to the people I'm keeping close. And if one of those is dysfunctional in a way that's causing me to chronically self-abandon, I'm probably doing some dysfunctional doing, right? Like if there's not a reciprocal relationship, I'm going to take over more work, whether it's in a home or in a business, right? And so that keeps me centered, is checking my relationships, because we're relational beings. That's our core motivator in life. And if we're just looking at like hacking our calendar, and we need to be mindful of structures, right? But if we're just looking at that, we're missing the motivating factor that's going to keep pulling us back into the stuff that doesn't feel good. I kind of love the mini mic.
I know, I kind of do too. I'll try to keep it short and sweet, but I say no. And that's really hard to do. And it's really hard to do as a mother. And you heard me talk about that experience of Montana. And I think what I was supposed to learn about that experience was how to cocoon, because we don't cocoon enough, right? And so to say no and give myself permission without guilt and shame to cocoon. And that's exactly what I do. I say no to the birthday parties or the invitations or the work that needs to be done. And I find the beautiful moment of cocooning, whatever that looks like, right? And to provide a safe place to shelter and rest and reprieve. So the power of no.
I have one more little thing to add. Giving people permission to be disappointed in me or judge me keeps me out of a ton of burnout.
Yeah, building off that, two things. People pleasing, right? That's been a big problem that I've struggled with a lot of my life, is people pleasing. And as Ashley said, learning to say, learning to say no, right? And then not being afraid to cocoon and kind of shield yourself from unnecessary obligations that are only going to lead you astray and create more frustration, create more imbalance. So people pleasing, that's something that a lot of people struggle with, right? How many people here have struggled with people pleasing, right? Afraid to say no to friends or afraid to say no to people. I've definitely struggled with that. So learning to set healthy boundaries is vitally important there. Also, when you're feeling burned out, it's a sign that you're probably living more, I guess it would be disalignment with ego rather than following the path of your spirit. So taking a moment, again, this is where meditation becomes vitally important, where if you're feeling that burnout feeling, stop, be still, be present, and talk and commune with your guru, talk and commune with your higher self, talk and commune with God, and figure out, literally have a conversation with your higher self, with your higher power, and ask it. yourself, because God lives within you. It's in you. It's here. It's nowhere else. It's in here. Ask, what is going on? Why am I in disalignment right now? And you'll often find the answer, and you'll find that usually what's happening is you're being led by your ego. Burnout is an ego projection, oftentimes. It's not living in alignment with our spirit. It's trying to control too much, control events too much with our minds, as opposed to surrendering. I know I keep coming back to surrender, but that would be a way to kind of address burnout, is to surrender back into spirit, to surrender back into spirit over and over and over and over again. Keep coming back to that. And I think if you surrender into spirit, you'll naturally fall into alignment with what it is that you should be doing in the moment. And if you're following spirit, nothing will feel like burnout. You'll actually have quite the opposite. If you follow spirit, you'll be fed. And you'll actually want more to come onto your plate because you're living in the service of spirit, not in the service of ego.
Yeah, when I was, speaking about burnout, when you're living your passion, as far as I'm concerned, you don't really get burnout as easy as when you're not. Like when I was an engineer and I hated like life, it's pretty much the truth of it. Long story there. I could work 20 hours a week and feel like I worked 80 and just be exhausted, you guys know. And now I work honestly 60 hours a week often, and I'm like full of energy. So that's because there's an alignment here. And I think, Megan, yeah, I read a quote that you said that burnout is misalignment. I wrote that down on my notes, and and then I also heard you, Forsyth, talk about alignment. It's an alignment issue. And so I want to turn it back to the audience and say, does that match for any of you guys in terms of alignment? And when have you guys been aligned or misaligned? I'd be happy to hear any of your stories as well. And I will hand you the little cute mic if you want to. Raise your hand if you want to answer that. Or if you have any questions now, this is a time too. You can ask any of the panelists questions about their perspectives and how they view this. Otherwise, I'm going to move right on. Okay, going once, going twice. I'll offer you guys again another opportunity there. So the other thing is addiction. I want to talk a little about addiction because I feel like there's a correlation again with like burnout and addiction, and to me anyways, they seem very similar. And I have been told that addicts who once they've sort of become sober. Let's take alcohol. That's the only kind I'm familiar with. Is often they'll then go and become addicted to something else, sugar maybe, or something else that will take the place of that addiction that they once had. So it's an interesting phenomenon, and I'm curious for all of you how you view addiction. What is it actually? And of course, Forrest, you're going to be the champ on this one, I think, because it sounds like you've got a lot of experience in this area. But what is addiction, one? And two, if you had to be vulnerable today and name your current addiction, let's assume we all have something, right? Maybe it's not. There's degrees to this. What would that be? And if you don't have an addiction at all, totally fine. You can pass on that part of it. But what is addiction, and do you have one?
Sure. That's a good question, Travis. I appreciate that. And we should all be, when Ashley's talking about authentic living and authentic connection, we should all be able to be in a room together and share our truths and share our pasts, right? So, addiction to me is unresolved pain that lives within us. And in mine, mine came, I shared I had suffered mightily with alcohol. And it was, a lot of it came from abandonment, feelings of abandonment. It came from inner wounding of rejection. And of course, a lot of these pains, they're real, but our minds have a way of replaying that pain and amplifying the pain. So addiction is basically unresolved pain. And that unresolved pain has to find some kind of expression, outward expression. And addiction is also, you can look at it another way too. It's the unresolved pain within us. And it's also the, at least I've found, that unresolved pain that manifests in darkness, right? It's the darkness that lives with us. It doesn't mean that we're dark beings. It means that in that period of addiction, we're overwhelmed or overly identified with the dark aspects of ourselves. Another way to put the darkness would be our shadow side. Yeah, we're associated. I love that, Angela. We're associated with our shadow side, or we're overly identified with our suffering. And so what we need to do is we need to really embrace our healing. So, in my case, I've spent time in counseling. I spent time, as I shared before, with a meditation community that helped me out of that period of alcohol abuse. We need to reestablish positive relationships in our lives, like surrounding ourselves with positive people. Ashley talked about that. Changing our thought patterns that we tell ourselves. One of the worst is, I'm an addict, and that's just the way I am, and I'll never get better. Right? So we need to change the way we talk to ourselves. We need to be kind with ourselves. We need to show love to ourselves. Self-love is often the best way out of addiction. Because around a lot of our pain that's unresolved, we feel a lot of shame. And we feel a lot of guilt. So we have to deal with that. Now, in terms of, addictions that I probably face today, one of them is what Ashley addressed today is I have a tendency sometimes, when things aren't going my way, I have an addiction to focusing on what is going wrong, right? Rather than on shifting the narrative and focusing on, okay, what is this hard moment teaching me? Rather than, and how can I cultivate a more positive direction moving forward? Sometimes I tend to I get addicted to kind of that complaining energy, right? Angela, you can, like, oh, I can't believe this happened. Okay, well, guess what? My meditation teacher used to always say, when something negative is happening and you're really going through it, he had a phrase you always said, this is how it is now. It doesn't mean that this is how it's going to always be. This is how it is now, accept what's happening in the moment. This is what happened. My dog has a UTI and I'm really worried about her health, and instead of screaming about it, what's actually happening now, I have to face it. Okay, well, how can I deal with this, and how can we move forward? All that complaining energy does is just puts you into a negative cycle and feedback loops. And that's been my addiction I've been trying to overcome, is that kind of getting out of those negative feedback loops when something uncomfortable happens.
So the question is how I define addiction and what my relationship is with it?
Yeah, what is addiction, and do you have any, and what would they be?
Okay, yeah. So most of you I don't know, but my background was I was a therapist. So that's some professional observation of supporting people with addictive patterns of all types. And I also had a half brother who lived with my abusive father who died of addiction. So I have two very different lived experiences, but a lot of wisdom around the energy of addiction. And I was raised by my mom, who said, we have a family history of alcoholism, be careful. So it's been on my radar for a very long time. So my learning around the energy of addiction, which I define as any adaptive pattern using something that isn't actually of service or of ultimate health to manage overwhelming pain or emotion, right? And it's often, I've seen, fueled by shame and victimhood. That's like the stuff it likes to munch on to stay strong. So mine, I was really clear, like I'm not drawn to alcohol in an unhealthy way. I'm not drawn to drugs because, frankly, I like to control too much, which leads me to what I found was I have to be really mindful of my addiction to codependency. A lot of times in psychological realms, there's addiction and then there's codependency. But codependency is just the addiction to being needed and strong and valued. So I have to watch anywhere I want to put on my superhero cape and be the one in someone else's emotional storm. Be the one who's because that is addictive to me if I'm not careful. So I manage that by, again, I have lots of checks and balances. I listen to my body, I watch my relational patterns, and if something gets off, I say no, I change terrain, I do the hard thing, but that's the main thing I have to watch, because the other stuff, the stuff that culture teaches us to look for, isn't my version of addiction. That's not where I go into the unhealthy, self-abandoning places.
Ooh, I'm still in the thick of this, so I'm going to take a big old deep breath. I never viewed myself as an addict. So like when you say that word, that still doesn't resonate. But I think what I realized, and I think that's because I never had the symptoms of dependency, right? So it's not like I could never not make it a day without having alcohol. What really started to surface for me is like, yes, the trauma, yes, the guilt, yes, the shame, right? But the way that it translated it for me was I was a high-functioning, high-powered individual, right, who used alcohol to cope with stress, anxiety, confidence, and worth. And so I think what I've learned from now trying to journey on a life of sobriety is how to cultivate those areas of wisdom and strength and healing without needing alcohol to connect with my partner on a date night and have intimacy. It's something we're working through. How to manage the stress and the busyness of being a parent, right? So I'm starting to identify my triggers. This is what's triggering me. And I used to use alcohol in this way, and now I don't need to. What can I do instead? And being really vulnerable, because I have a feeling that there are a lot of women out there who don't see themselves as addicts the way I didn't see myself as an addict. And all of a sudden I realized that trying to not drink Monday through Friday, only to drink every Friday and Saturday, is a problem. And repeating that cycle and telling myself, well, I can make it 5 days, or I can make it 7 days, or I can make it 14 days. And then I would still find myself at the end of the bottle drinking all by myself and waking up hungover in front of my kids. And so that was the wake up moment for me when I realized there may not be necessarily a dependency, but there is an unhealthy relationship in which I am using this to function for connection in my life and managing anxiety. Yeah.
Wow. I just want to say, wow, for all the vulnerability that just happened. I just personally feel like I appreciate so much when people can be vulnerable. Thank you for all of you for sharing the way you do. That's what this place is. It's a safe place to be able to do that. At least that's what I'm trying to create. And I think everybody here is too. We have, time-wise, we're about 30 minutes into this segment, and I think we're past 1 o'clock, so we're probably going to finish up. Before we do, we're going to do 2 more things. One is any questions or comments, observations from any of you, and 2, then we'll go through, and I want to just know what you guys are excited about for. Everybody has awesome projects happening. I want to hear what you're excited about for this next year. Before we do that, any questions, comments, observations? No? Okie doke. Well, let's just pass it on down. Who wants to start? You want to just go down?
So one of the things that I'm most excited about for this upcoming year is I'm trying to organize a series of peace gatherings on college campuses and high schools where we have a space to gather to talk about the importance of inner peace, to introduce young people to meditation, and to foster community and authentic connection. In my day job, I'm a college professor, and I see the unbelievable amount of anxiety that is facing young people. So one of my goals this upcoming year is to start a project that involves essentially an inner peace. I might even call it the Inner Peace Project, and going to high schools and colleges and introducing young people to healthy, authentic connections. And I think connecting with our youth is one of the most important things, and that's something that I've become extremely passionate about in recent years. I'm also at work on 2 books right now. One is called Everyday Communion, 14 Ways to Live a Sacred Life. And it's all about fostering deep spiritual connection in our lives. And then I'm also working on another book that I'm about to start called Share the Good News. And it's basically a message of hope for people in this troubled times, where we can see examples of a new reality of light and spiritual uplift emerging. So I hope to finish both books this year. Very excited about that, and to start this project geared towards the youth on college campuses and high schools.
Wonderful.
And so it is. I'm excited about a lot of things. I feel like this last year of the snake got rid of a lot of things that were keeping me from charging forward with my full light and full expanded purpose. And so I'm in the middle of a very big rebrand of my business. So if you get one of my cards and look at my website, it is not going to look like that in about a month. It's a whole makeover vibe. And I'm really excited about shifting and really stepping into my power in this phase of being a thought leader to help usher in the new world. I am here to help people who are change makers and purpose driven build something new. I'm calling it imaginal change, right? We've been trying to build something new with the old building blocks, and that's not going to take us where we need to go. We need to tap into kind of quantum wisdom. And I'm really lit up about now seeing so clearly how my past has led me to have a toolbox to help right now at this point in history. So